This is Linux in Laws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever else fancies your tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy, Mum? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back on a speaker in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35, or any pets, including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusted guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs. Welcome to Linux in Laws, Season 1, still Episode 97.
Yes.
Martin.
Yeah.
Martin, how are things?
Yeah. It's difficult to answer that one. Many things.
Let me guess.
Many things are happening.
The United Kingdom is no longer united.
No, it's
Yes,
still
close.
united
Okay,
for the
fair
time
enough.
being. For the time being, it still is.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's like a,
Charles has stepped down.
not as far as I know.
We are recording this in April.
No.
98.
He was in fact at the AI summit in Bletchley Park a couple of days ago. So unless something has happened in between, and he has been.
So
replaced.
he was replaced by a Terminator or something.
Maybe,
Excellent,
yes.
excellent.
No, the Terminator himself was there as well, actually.
He was.
Yeah.
You mean Donald Trump was in Bletchley Park?
No, Elon.
He was. What did he
He
say?
was. AI can be dangerous. Well done, Elon.
Alan, if you're listening to this, spot on.
Yeah.
A rumor has it
You probably watched the movie as well.
Apparently, you're co-funded OpenAI, but hell, who gives a shit anyway?
Anything that can make a quick buck. Yeah. Anyway, how are you?
Speaking. Sorry, before we go into that,
okay.
Alan, Mr. Musk, if you're listening, if you need some help with something called X, formerly known as Twitter, simply send a mail to feedback@linuxinlaws.eu. Just mention the nature of the problem. We'll send a quote and we can help you. Not a big deal.
I have a tip for him as well. He should have called it Y. That would have been much more accurate.
A classic, Mr. A classic.
Yeah. Anyway,
how am I?
Going back to you. Yes.
Yeah, I'm struggling. I'm still living in Germany. Hasn't changed. It's getting November. No, it is actually November. So Halloween is over. But apart from that, I'm still in one piece.
Well, apart from the bits they.
As usual, yeah. I'm slowly getting a Terminator myself, I suppose. Anyway, this is not a show about Terminators, but rather about open source software, which nicely segues us into tonight's topic, namely the use of open source software in scary stuff, the public sector. So, Martin, before we tackle the subject, we should probably define what exactly a public sector is.
Yeah, sure. Public sector is any organization, body that's funded by the taxpayer.
Exactly, namely by us. And if you're ever wondering where your money goes, as in...
Hang on a minute, wait. Do you actually pay tax? You don't have a job, do you?
I do.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Every time I buy a loaf of bread, I'm paying value-added taxes.
So
you don't?
Yeah, fair enough, yeah. Well, I don't buy the bread. The missus buys the bread, so...
Martin. Whatever happened to 120 years of women's rights?
Well, she has the right to buy bread. I don't have a problem with that. It's fine.
Women of the world, if you're listening, if you want to give out to Martin, just send mail to feedback@linuxinlaws.eu.
Oh, you don't want them to be able to buy bread? I don't know. Which country are you living in? I don't know. Anyway.
Jeez, Martin, is there anything else we should know about you in that quarter? Fucking hell. Anyway.
Okay.
Yes.
Public sector.
So if you're ever wondering where your money goes, as in the moolah that you spend on taxes of your hard-earned income, similar like moving stuff to /dev/null
Yes.
This is the public sector for you.
Public sector, yeah. And then there's
No,
the one public sector to rule them all.
exactly.
Which is Brussels. Anyway.
Sorry. No. I think this is called London these days, no?
No, we're not part of this organization. Yeah.
I know, but London and Paris is still the capital of something called the Little Kingdom.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, but we don't pay double taxes. Yeah.
No, you don't pay double taxes, but you just pay taxes living there, Martin. So
indeed,
every pound you earn, as you do, you have to tax, of course, and that money goes directly to Daft Null in London, I suppose.
Well, and then they give it to Scotland, to Wales, to lots of other parts where they don't have much money and lots of unemployment. So,
in the interest of fact-level detail, as in the truth, a tiny fraction of that money goes to Wales, Scotland, and other parts of the kingdom, I suppose. The rest stays where it is. But we won't go into the corruption allegations of the British government.
Indeed. Yeah. Well, they just build some new train line which nobody needs. But anyway.
Exactly. So let's tackle some other countries that basically
made back to the public sector. Yes,
made a well devoted or well mentioned a move into open source software worth mentioning. Should we start? Probably let's keep Munich for later because that's a bit of a controversial issue. Why don't we start with the UK for that matter, or even the US?
Yeah,
or should we start with France, being that most communist country of them all? France, yes. For the people who do not know, France is a country west of Germany in Europe. Capital is Paris. Now, they are under the impression that they invented a couple of centuries ago the most prestigious red wines on the planet. They couldn't be closer to the truth.
Well, it's a matter of taste, really.
Well, exactly. In addition to this,
they will claim this all day long. I'm sure.
In addition to this, apart from being a very communist state at the very core, you only have to take a closer look because, for example, if you take a close look at
funding of all the industry,
how much power unions have in France.
That's true. Yes,
exactly. And the amount of vacation you get working in France, and when you actually can enter, what's the word I'm looking for? Not pension life, but being an OAP, an old age pensioner. As in, thank you very much, Martin. Yes, at the age when you can enter retirement, which is, I think, the lowest in Europe, no? Or one of the lowest in Europe.
I'm not French.
I mean, people took to the streets not too long ago.
I know that this happens on a daily basis. Probably in the last 5 minutes, they found another reason.
Fair point, man. But on the other side, they just took to streets in droves about the fact that the current minister wanted to increase retirement age from 63 to 64 or something. Not to 67, like, for example, in Germany, just 1 year more or 1.5 years more. And the country pretty much came to a standstill. That tells you something about the power of the people that hasn't really changed since something called the French Revolution back in the olden days.
Yeah, I think the politicians are well aware of this and taking no risks.
So... And of course, it goes without saying that actually France is I wouldn't say on the forefront of FLOSS adoption in Europe, but I reckon they have really incorporated, I wouldn't say the slogan public money, public code, which of course goes back to the Free Software Foundation of Europe, who says that essentially that every taxpayer euro, it used to be franc, but now it's euro. But now it's euro in France. Pound, dollar, what have you, has to be, and which is actually spent on open source, on developing open source software. That this source code then has to be open in the open, as in being publicly available. This, and of course, links will be in the show notes. There has been a campaign of the Free Software Foundation, at least in Europe, if not in the US, for quite some time now. And I think some countries have taken this kind of really literally, and France is one of them. For example, and of course, as I said, links will be in the show notes, in 2021, they formed an initiative that was funded to the tune of 30 million euros just for this year and the following years, where they said the country has to adopt open source software, not just for the public sector, but on a general basis. But also, they made the code available on code.guv.fr in terms of everybody can take a look at it. That is funded by taxpayers' money.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the fact that they were really on the forefront when it came to, for example, adopting LibreOffice as a general replacement for proprietary software. As a matter of fact, I think already back in the 2010s, they devised a staged plan that step by step proprietary software would be replaced by open source software. And they started actually with LibreOffice, and then they moved on to other components.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a public body that sort of gathers these statistics, and the French the French government uses 57% is OSS software, which doesn't sound like that much, but it's higher than the average for most countries, which is 35%.
Wow, okay.
So there you go.
So what's next, man? UK?
Yeah, UK. Yeah, let's do the UK. So UK have always been, they've been having an open source first strategy policy for a long time, which doesn't completely...
the last 5 years?
No, since 2011, really.
2011?
Yeah.
Why doesn't anybody know about this? That's interesting. Because, I mean, I can't recall making
most
this
people in the
headline
UK know
news.
about this, really.
They do. I see.
I see. Well, in the software industry, yeah.
No, we're getting somewhere, Martin. Okay. That was even before they left the EU. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, but this is, let's say, probably not a policy as such, because policy would be too strong. It's more like a guideline, right? So you public bodies try and use open source whenever possible. But however, this year they did a new policy paper, which again sort of emphasized the commitment to OSS. So it's certainly, in a professional capacity, it's certainly become clear that they have that policy, but it doesn't exclude them not using open source, of course, where if and where they choose to do so.
So this is a recommendation because people will be quartered, hanged, and burned in France, as usual. I might add. I'm joking, people.
No, they chop off their heads, don't they, in France? They have the guillotine.
Well, exactly. I think they invented the machine for this. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Because they will be subjected to this punishment if they don't use open source software. Of course, that is a joke. But in France, it's really being cracked down on. But it sounds like more like in the UK, it's rather a recommendation. So you will not be quartered, hanged, and your head being chopped off and decapitated if you do not use open source software in the public sector.
Yeah. But many of the let's say government departments I've dealt with in the past, they have a strong use of open source software in many guises. Schools are not so great, unfortunately, on this front yet. It's very much a Microsoft stronghold, sadly. But
Microsoft is this company in that splinter state of something formerly known as the United Kingdom, right? As in the US of A.
Yeah.
If I'm completely mistaken.
It used to be some kind of colony, but they had something against tea, and then they decided to do something. I can't remember that.
But that's
something along
totally
those lines.
yeah, so different subject. Anyway, links maybe in your favorite history books. Sorry, details may be in favorite history books. Just read it up, people. Jokes aside, no, okay. It sounds like more like a recommendation than a firm statute.
No, well, yeah, but the as I said, the government departments I've dealt with, like the DWP, the NHS, they very much.
What's the DWP?
Department for Work and Pensions. They're up in Leeds. They have a small campus there where lots of people work, but they basically they give.
Hang on, I thought you were still working. Have you reached retirement age already?
Sadly not. No.
See? So what was the issue that you had to deal with the DWP?
Not an issue. No, they use open source software, so they need some assistance.
So you assisted them. Very good, very good. In the true spirit of sharing and caring.
Well, it was in a professional capacity.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Only money change hands. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Which of course goes to show that you can make money with open source software. People, don't get me wrong. No, by all means. So sorry, Martin. Do carry on.
Well, I mean that you mentioned the point about making money, right? This is all the dealings I've had with government organizations. They have been using open source software with commercial support, to be fair.
So may I ask, what did they actually use at the DWP and the NHS? Of course, the NHS standing for the National Health Service, which is the main healthcare provider in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, both of them obviously strong Linux users, but mainly also Postgres database users.
Oh no, here we go again.
As pretty much every organization in the world. And by the way, Postgres 16 comes out next week, in case you're wondering.
Going back to much safer routes, Martin. What exactly did they use? Just curious, actually. Red Hat?
Yeah, everybody uses Red Hat because they can get
because
support.
Support, okay.
Yep.
Of course,
Yep.
very well. In contrast, actually, to a city called Munich, which nicely leads us actually into the German situation with regard to free, libre, and open source software. Now, Munich is a very interesting example.
I have a question on
this.
Is this a local government policy because you have these kind of what do you call them? Not states, but yeah, every state has their own kind of legislation to some degree.
Yes, in contrast to what's the word I'm looking for? Monarchies. Which technically the UK still is, I suppose. Democracy came in later, if at all.
That's a good question.
The rest, actually, people will be in the history books. Just read
it I don't know. A monarchy is that where the head of state is a king or queen?
Well, you have a king now, no?
We do, but is he actually the head of state? Is the question. Anyway, never mind. We digress here. Let's go back to the open source.
Exactly. Munich, of course, would be the capital of a federal state known as Bavaria. Now, Bavaria only technically is part of Germany because many people, Germans probably being the most important ones in that group, would regard Bavaria as the Texas of Germany, as in always wanting to get out of the mess that is known as a federal country, federally ruled country, let's put it this way, similar to the US and other countries. But technically, Bavaria is still part of Germany. So the way it works, that each and every federal state has its own capital, and Munich would be the capital of said Bavaria. Munich made a very interesting decision in 2003, namely replacing the predominant Microsoft-based working stations and also the backends with free and open source software. So a project called Linux, as in Linux for Munich, was born. That in contrast to said UK organizations, as in public body sectors, had the intention of rolling their own, for example, distro, in terms of a ready-to-be-installed distribution that could be used on backends, that could be used on desktops, with the kernel at the very base layer, and then the usual desktop environment in the very beginning based on KDE, if I'm not completely mistaken, and then a special set of applications targeted at a typical workflow of your public sector worker in Munich, as in mostly administrative workflows, like registering for a passport, getting a driver's license, and you name it. The typical things that you do when you're working as a clerk in a public sector body, like in Munich, or like in any other state administration, so to speak. Long story short, some people in Redmond weren't too happy with this, as you can imagine, and now it probably is the time to shed some more light on the details of the situation. A company known as Microsoft has its German headquarters in a suburb of Munich called Glasbrunn, if I'm not completely mistaken. And Steve Ballmer actually went to Munich with the aim of reversing that decision in the 2000s. It took their sweet time in order to get there, and it also took some rigging of a consultancy company that came up with a paper on the whole situation and all the rest of it. Details, of course, people will be in the show notes. But let me put it this way, Linux is an example for how not to do it, especially if you're talking about a large federal state in a country where politics are at the very top of the list. Long story short, Microsoft started digging at this with the sweetener of moving its headquarters from Glasbrunn to Schwabing, which is actually a part of Munich, as in the carrot dangling in front of the administrative body, as in the administrate in Munich, if they would reverse this decision, because with moving this headquarter, a serious amount of taxes would tag along, because as you can imagine, if you move a headquarter from a suburb as an independent town back to Munich, all of the taxes that Microsoft would have to pay would also go into Munich's coffers. And that was exactly the carrot that Ballmer was dangling in front of the city. But it took them about 14 years time, because only in 2017 they actually came to the conclusion that this Linux migration away from Windows was way too expensive, way too complicated, and all the rest of it, and said, we want to go back to a Microsoft-dominated work.
Was there not a lawsuit as well by Microsoft?
Can't remember that. Maybe.
Okay.
I know that HP did a study on this, came up with a paper. Some people allude or relate this outcome to some Microsoft funding, let's put it this way, because as you can imagine, HP, especially with their server, what's the word I'm looking for? Line of business, exactly, is or has been traditionally really dependent on Microsoft Windows. Going back some time now, but I reckon that HP in itself is still a big Microsoft user. So the ties are, I wouldn't say are clearly visible, but at least are somewhat under the covers, if you will. So push comes to shove, Munich eventually came to the conclusion in 2017 that this decision wasn't the best one. And this is and now it gets really interesting. With the change of the political structure of the ruling body of Munich, that reverse decision was again reversed in 2020. Now, in 2020, the newly formed capital government decided to reverse that decision back towards open source. Now, given the fact that we're recording this in 2023, it's been 3 years, the jury is still out on the overall outcome. But this is probably a perfect example for politics at play in such wide-ranging decisions, because I think conservative estimates boil the number of desktops alone in the city that are involved in these decisions to around 40,000. Now, that's a lot, people. Especially if you're thinking about the people working at these desktops being trained, retrained once again on all the rest of it. Never mind the support, never mind the people looking after imaging these desktops and all the rest of it.
Do we have some public insight into the finances of the Munich administration? As in,
It's the numbers that are publicly available will be in the show notes, as in the links to them. Let's put it.
Yeah, I'm just curious what so they reversed it in 2017 to go back to Microsoft, but
yeah, needless to say, it's all hush hush because you're talking politics at the end of the day. So the numbers that are publicly available may or may not be correct. So everything published, you have to take with a grain of salt. Goes without saying, because interests are at play here. Goes without saying.
Well, money, right?
But I reckon it's totally different in the UK, where you have a clear-cut government ruled by not people, by people that cannot be bribed, right?
That's the same for all government, surely.
I see.
That's why they go into politics in the first place, I think.
I can recall certain shenanigans with a certain Boris Johnson, but that's ages ago, I suppose.
He's no longer the PM. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But this is not a podcast about politics, but rather of course. Exactly. So, Martin, anything else we should mention before we move on the remaining subject of state-done distributions? Which gets really interesting.
Okay. So, well, I mean, what about okay. So we can talk about government organizations, departments, whatever, right? They can use it on desktops, they can use it on backends, etc. I think the more relevant question for me is around the schools, right? This is something that is rather annoying over here, is that they all grow up with Microsoft, which means that they don't get experience with alternatives. And so it'd be nice to see, because there is no reason for. Yes, okay. Obviously, they're heavily subsidized, all the school licenses and so on. But it's kind of like anything. If you're used to something, you're less likely to change or look into alternatives. Yes. So, what is the situation on that in other countries? Do we know?
At least I know this for Germany, because in Germany it's been a grassroots effort. Especially in the southern parts of Germany, Baden-Württemberg comes to mind, where actually quite a few companies, mind you, tried to change this Microsoft-based product training, for want of a better expression, to something much more open source related. They succeeded to some extent, because quite a few districts in said federal state have adopted the use of FLOSS software in schools. There, and as I said, links will in the show notes, but these links go back to a company. Well, one of them goes back to a company that is, of course, a German-based company, so the website would be in German, because they cover the German market. But it's a grassroots effort, as in basically it boils down to individual communities, for want of a better expression, as in districts, cities, you name it, to call these shots, because the schools, for example, in a town in Germany are governed by a body that is associated with this town or city. Meaning, yes, you have a Ministry of Culture on a federal level, but the individual product choices and so forth boil down to a much more local level. Right. This is what I mean by grassroots effort. So each and every district, town, what have you, running their school system gets to make their own choices. It's not mandated from the very top, because that's a federal approach here in Germany. I reckon in the UK it's really different, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, there are different types of schools in the UK, but all the public schools, they have the decisions are made by the Department of Education, right? So
what about
they don't have
private
the choice.
Yeah, what about
Private schools have more choice, but I think it's more of a self-perpetuating kind of scenario, right? It's if the teachers don't know about it, there's no support infrastructure for educating the teachers or helping the teachers to promote these things, and the IT staff in the schools, they won't know how to use it or install it and look after it and so on. So this is, I mean, it's all kind of self-perpetuating once.
Okay.
Unless there is a high-level ruling to change all this, then because it's not a one day from the next thing, right? These things take time. People need to be retrained by body and so on. So
absolutely. And given the fact that you have kids actually attending the university system in the UK, is it really different in universities in the UK?
Well, universities, they have their own choice of. By that time, clearly they have many years of YouTube experience, but they can find out anything they need to and use whichever software they need to as well. So,
no, I meant actually from a curriculum perspective, as in
I see.
FLOSS being part of the overall. Say, for example, if you want to study computer science, that actually open source is part of the curriculum. As in, you're being trained on Linux.
Of course, yeah.
Open source compilers, you use open source ecosystems, frameworks, what have you, because I clearly see this in Germany happening on a broader level. I was just talking over the last year to a number of universities, and the adoption rate of open source technologies, not just for teaching, as in you have a course on Linux. Major projects are done with open source software, and all the rest. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
I reckon.
it's the same in Holland as well. It's
okay. Yeah, I mean, given the predominant, I reckon, position of Holland with regards to open source, I mean, Linux comes to mind and all the rest of it. Holland must be really at the forefront with regards to use of open source software in the university system, no?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, one of my nieces is studying medical computer science or something like that, but then everything is open source based too.
Amazing. So Berlin, if you're listening, go to Amsterdam, check it out. Sorry, Den Haag. That would be no. Den Haag is the capital of Holland, no?
It's not the capital, but that's where the government resides. Yes.
Sorry, yes, I was getting confused.
Yeah.
The capital is what?
Amsterdam.
Nijmegen also. Amsterdam, okay. not Nijmegen, okay?
No, not Nijmegen. No.
I always get confused. Sorry about this. Anyway, okay. We still have, I think, 2.5 minutes to spend on government distributions. Just to name 2 examples. Yes, governments have copped on to the fact that Microsoft is not in the solution at its end. So, for example, China has come up with a distribution called Deepin. And of course, as I said, links in the show notes. Deepin is actually the idea, of course, behind these state-done distributions. And when I say it's state-done, I mean you have more often than not a body that is state-funded that looks after software, and one of the outcomes is actually something that you can use, which is Linux-based on your desktop. So China has something called Deepin, which is based on Debian stable. As a matter of fact...
What about Red Star OS?
Yeah, we're getting there in a minute, Mark.
Oh, okay.
Don't steal my thunder, please.
Uh-huh.
Now, Deepin is a very particular case because they have been a member of something called the Linux Software Foundation since 2015. That goes to show that actually, yes, you can. you can actually do your distribution, and you can peddle it outside of China as well.
Mm.
And
And
more,
what's the reason for them to do their own distribution?
well, it's an alternative to paying Microsoft dollars, I suppose.
Then what about using, I don't know, a CentOS or a Rocky or whatever, right?
Deepin, if you're listening, the email address is feedback@linuxinlaws.eu. If you care to share your choice of Debian stable as the foundation for Deepin, let me know.
Yes.
Or let us know, rather. No, jokes aside, apparently the adoption rate in China is quite visible, if not remarkable. But
It's probably a question of not having a choice over there.
exactly. But outside China, yes, some people use it because the sources actually speak about an invisible adoption rate outside China as well. But I can at least recall one or two German podcasts doing a review of this quite some time ago, which is interesting, given the fact that this is a Chinese distribution. Now, you already mentioned Red Star. Now, Red Star is a very interesting project. The full name is Red Star Operating System, and it's actually done in North Korea. Now, given the fact that this is not pure FLOSS, it's still worth mentioning because it has been in existence since 1998. This is basically when the first cut was rolled. I think it was point 1 or something like this. Of course, the idea was, to gain independence from the likes of Red Hat, the likes of Microsoft and all the rest of it. But also, of course, because, and this is where it gets really interesting. If you go to the website, if you check out the corresponding Wikipedia page, it's classified as proprietary software.
Okay.
For the very same reason that not all of its components are under a free and open source software license. Of course, the idea is that you compile a Linux distribution where you have full control over, and of course, because I reckon it's mostly used in North Korea, you have a backdoor into each and every desktop, server, whatever, that has this operating system installed. So you can exactly suss out what's going on these machines. Hence, it's not all open source software licensed.
Yeah, there's probably some components that allow the government to spy on their citizens.
Plus, they have a very interesting update policy because, for example, in 2011, when Firefox, one of their main browser choices, was already on version 5, they were still on version 3.5. So they probably have adopted the CentOS approach. Just let it. What's the word I'm looking for?
Mature
forward. Exactly. Thank you very much, Mark. Exactly. So I reckon, I mean, jokes aside, it's probably something that they use heavily to spy on their own people. Again, pure speculation. But if you put these pieces together, it all makes sense at the end of the day.
There's nobody decompiled this stuff to have a look at it.
Not that I know of, but people feel free to do that sort of research and send us feedback. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody would have taken this apart and written paper on it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I haven't found this yet. Anything else we should mention before we wrap this up, Martin?
Well, I guess why are we discussing this, right?
This is quite forward, actually, no? To instill hope in the cherished listenership that not all of the taxpayers' money is wasted. So that we can keep the number of brutal and bloody revolutions to a minimum. Just because of this reason, no?
Yeah, that's one. I mean, the use of open source software in governments and schools, etc., by not spending more taxpayers' money as needed. However, just by use alone, does that really help the open source projects, right? So could they do more to... this is the whole funding discussion, right? Debate around open source software. Could more be done if they would actually actively engage in these projects rather than just promote the usage?
Two-edged sword, right? So, okay, yes. If you
and if so, why are they not doing this?
Well, that's actually a very good question, but I reckon two sides of the story here. Fair enough, or two sides of the coin. Yes, taxpayers' money should be spent, my opinion, I reckon that goes for Martin as well, on open source software, because open source software drives innovation, among other things, and open source software carries the usual advantages. No need to explain this, because if you wouldn't know this, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. Second aspect to this whole thing.
Well, if you stop there for a second, you come back to the second one in a minute, because we talk about spending money on open source software. The money is spent on support, right, and training, which is usually done by commercial entities who have taken on those open source projects rather than, a true, let's say, open source non-for-profit organization.
Correct, Martin, but if you take a look at a company formerly known as Red Hat, now truly IBM, I suppose, never mind branding or not.
Yep.
That company inside IBM, that line of business, not a company anymore, I reckon, but that line of business still spends a lot of their revenue on research and development. GNOME, the kernel are just two examples here, where much of the contributions of the commits actually come from Red Hat.
But Red Hat employees, yes.
Exactly. I mean, Red Hat employees as the IBM employees still working on these projects.
Yes.
And for example, Nextcloud, best example. Nextcloud, as probably some people know, is a software vendor that supplies one of the most used, as in favorite, collaboration platforms on the planet. If they wouldn't have the revenue, and Frank Karliczek, if you're listening, our heart goes out to you, because we're using, as in Linux Indoors, are using a Nextcloud instance to do this podcast too. If Frank Karliczek wouldn't have this, and Frank Karliczek, of course, being the proprietor of or the CEO of that company, if Frank wouldn't have this revenue, he couldn't spend money on paying the software engineers to develop the code base further, which is publicly available on GitHub.
Was it Nextcloud who had the different operating model, or was that Big Blue Button?
No, it had, but they reversed this.
They reversed this?
Yes.
How come?
Because they came to sense in terms of, they came to the conclusion that, for example, limiting certain functionality in the code base didn't make sense, the enterprise or not. So,
no, I meant the whole organization of the that every contributor was a shareholder and stuff like that.
Do not know, to be honest with you. I don't think that they had this in the first place, but maybe I'm wrong.
I never checked out the podcast. Anyway,
that was ages ago.
Yes, I know. Maybe. Fair enough. So this is the point, right? So an Nextcloud model where every contributor is a shareholder, blah, fine. This is different from a Red Hat where the ultimate goal is to fund the shareholders, or that's how that company is controlled. So fine, their employees do open source contributions, which is great. But it's a different operating model. And
no, Martin, I reckon for Nextcloud, it's just going back to the company, it's fair to say that the company does the commits. Yeah, the employees write the code, fair enough. But one of the business models, one of the most important business models, actually, with that service generated revenue, with regards to support and all the rest of it, you actually fund the code base that is published, which is free for everybody to download, which is free for everybody to install. If you don't if you don't need support, you like the in-laws, you can host that yourself. You just roll your own, fine. But the code is available, and the innovations come from said revenue of Nextcloud and, of course, the rest of the contributors. But if you check out the code base, most of the commits actually come from Nextcloud employees.
Yeah, but I mean, you're kind of making a case for innovation is only possible by funding, which is not entirely true in open source world, I would argue.
True. Very true. But somebody has to pay the bills.
Well, this is my point. The governments could be employing contributors, supporters to certain open source projects, right, that are critical to their running.
Which, of course, France does with a set of repositories that I mentioned earlier. Because all of this code would have been written by state employees and would have been made available to the general public.
Very good. There you go. You heard it here first. France is ahead of the...
So, Monsieur Macron, if you're listening, if you want to make the French case, the email address is feedback@linuxinlaws.eu. Just send a mail and we'll sort you out. As a matter of fact, no jokes aside, if anybody from a public sector body is listening and would like to be on this podcast, because I reckon with the last hour we just touched the surface. We just scratched the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. Feel free, if you have the time to make your case, to shed some light on your most important / pet whatever project. Feel free to get in touch, and we would be more than happy to host you for an episode.
Indeed.
And that, of course, does include Red Star OS, but only if you can talk about the backdoors.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, jokes aside. The proxies, Martin.
Yeah.
What's your POX?
Good question. My POX is, I think, really, I would say the Netherlands is my POX of the week.
You come from there, Martin. No?
I do.
And now, why is the Netherlands your POX?
I
get it. It's a great country. Very
there are
cheap
specific reasons.
All the rest of it. I get that angle, but no. I mean, seriously. I mean, you haven't been to Amsterdam yet. Okay, fair enough.
That's fine. There's too many tourists there.
Yeah. Exactly. I think the name of the street, so I heard anyway, is Spiegelgracht or something like this. For all adult entertainment choices that come to mind.
Entirely possible. You're clearly the expert on this.
No, Martin, this is what I heard now.
I see.
No, Martin, why? I mean, I have my perspective on this, but more on that in a minute. But why do you relate back to your home country in that regard?
Yeah, well, clearly because, I have been not living there for quite some years now. But it's quite, looking at the country from the outside, so to speak, makes it a little bit more real, or you have a better perspective on what the country is about, what the people are about, and yeah, in short, there is a lot of knowledge, or people know about the tolerance of the Dutch people, etc., etc. But that is really the case, that they do try and live together in many ways, in not just in let's say the normal ways with schools and immigrants and stuff like that. It's also about how they deal with infrastructure and nature and all these kind of things. It's it's very much less of a third world country, let's put it that way. They put some serious thought into what they do and decide, and with a common goal in mind, usually.
I mean, this is where they come from, no? All these centuries ago, when they evolved from what's the word I'm looking for? Northwest German.
I don't know. The Spanish were there, the French were there.
Yeah, but
There are many, many different people tried to
well, at the end of the day,
occupy
and,
it.
and
Yes.
this goes back at least 1,000, if not more years. I mean, they come from a northwestern German tribe called the Frisians, or most of them anyway. Let's put it this way.
The people in Friesland, though, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Which kind of spread then through the countryside, but that's a different story for another history podcast or whatever. But at the end of the day, they separated, especially for the last couple of centuries, from the predominant German ruling in terms of what Germany stood for. And fair play to them, because in many regards, and this is my pure biased German perspective, in many regards, Netherlands is the better Germany. When it
I get
comes
the
down,
impression that Germany is a bit more divided, right? It's more,
yes,
yeah.
the Netherlands have, among other things, a much more relaxed approach to certain aspects of modern life. Never mind their true meaning of democracy, which I reckon is not too far off from the Swiss approach of how to rule a country. As in how to rule, of course, is the wrong word, how to govern a country with regards to when it comes down to basic decisions, basic functioning.
Yeah.
Because in Germany, you have a federal system that is fragmented down to 16 federal states and to at least 6, 7 parties in the federal government in Berlin, which is not too far off from 16 in the Knesset, which is the Israeli government, if I'm not completely mistaken. But no, jokes aside, I mean, and I'm not the only one, I reckon, seeing the Netherlands in that light. Of course, both countries do have their disadvantages, goes without saying. No worries about that. But I reckon in many regards, Netherlands has really kind of taken the forefront on certain aspects that really make a country work, I suppose. And full disclosure, I have been to Netherlands about 25 times. And any time I really was I was really looking forward going back there. Never mind Amsterdam or not, because in contrast to popular belief, the Netherlands do consist of much more than just Amsterdam.
Indeed.
Okay,
Anyway,
so
what
people,
about your box? Yes, sorry.
so last sentence on this. People, if you want to see a really nice country, just go to the Netherlands, and if you are so inclined, go outside Amsterdam, because Amsterdam is great, but the rest is even better and cheaper, I think.
It's definitely better, yeah. Amsterdam is just for tourists. Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway.
Okay, back to my pox. Okay, yeah,
Yes.
my pox is actually a fan movie called Predator: Dark Ages. For those of you who are not familiar with Predator, Predator goes back to a 1987 movie.
Was that long ago?
Exactly, Martin. Yes,
Okay.
we are getting old. With one of the famous actors of all times called Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm joking. Of Terminator fame and all the rest of it. For those few people who do not know the original Predator movie, it's essentially about a group of mercenaries falling prey to an alien mercenary, warrior, whatever you want to call it. Being, thank you very much.
Of not non-friendly disposition.
Yes, exactly. like a warrior is probably the best description.
Yes.
And the movie has reached cult status in certain quarters. I wouldn't go that far. But it has spawned, for want of a better expression, a franchise of
remakes,
mediocre
sequels.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you're really looking for a good version, if you're really looking for a good sequel, Predator: Dark Ages is about 26 minutes long. The storyline, and I won't give away too much now because that would be spoiling the fun. The movie is about a group of crusaders in Scotland or going back to Scotland and then falling and then running into settlement.
Oh, sorry, this is the new one, not the old one. Yes.
No. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. No. Arnie didn't run into the predator in Scotland.
No. I thought this was in the jungle. Yeah, I don't remember any jungles in Scotland.
No, the Dark Ages is actually, as I said, about a group of crusaders, and quite a mixed bunch, as they used to be back then, as I said, 1,000 years ago. And rather than running into this predator, but in contrast to the other Predator movies, this one is really worth watching because A, it's short, and B, the plot is very good.
It's really short.
Yes. And the twist at the end is really watchable. Don't miss out on it if you're into Predator. So, as I said, available at your streaming service of choice, I suppose. Just go for it. Of course, links will be in the show notes.
Nice.
This is the Linux in-laws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license, type Attribution Share Alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for their song Solid Market, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under CC at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts.